Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Hawkeye, the first two episodes. So, immediately I could say that this show is fun. There's a lot of fun to be had here. It seems to be much more easier to grasp and get rather than like a Loki, where it's like there's so much stuff that they have to like shove down your throats via the early stages of that show to just have you just be like, God, there's like, what is all this stuff? Like, what are they even talking about? It feels like I'm talking in German when I'm going to have to review this show. And WandaVision was just really confusing, and I was like, what the is this show even? Like, what is going on here? And even when they kind of tell you eventually what the show is, you're just like, like, I don't care now. Like, it's been too long. This show, we really just have fun. We really play to the fact that this is to be a Christmas timed like show, which I'm just like, well, it's November, but like when really looking at it, they just wanted to put together a Christmas themed show, which is like, okay, all right, fine. That makes a lot of sense because Clint is to really be wanting to spend Christmas time with his family in this episode. And so I can be completely fine with that. In these two episodes, we get quite a few things that are to tie into the Avengers one way or the other. And when you go into this show, you'll know exactly what I mean. We immediately have some characters that I'm like, oh, okay, that's obviously so and so Marvel character. And like I'm really just going like, okay, so like, is there just a lot of smoke screens here? Are we to think one way and like, where is the swerve all gonna come? Are we gonna find out that reasonably who we think people are is not who they actually are? Is some people who are going to have immediately possibly been taken away from us in the early stages of this episode, are they going to come back and surprise us and say, "Booga!" Like I wasn't really gone missing for however long, or I was this person for however long, or whatever. Like trying to leave it very vague and mysterious, but when I go into spoilers, I'll exactly explain what I mean. So, but I had a lot of fun with this episode. I think really just having Haley Steinfeld, if I'm saying that right, as Kate was actually a really good choice. Like, she's a really fun character. Like, she works really well with Jeremy Renner's character, of course, Clint. We're really just having fun with these characters, and like we have some kind of characters that feel kind of like the Falcon and Winter Soldier kind of show, where we really just have like these common crime kind of characters that don't have these like super soldier serumed things within them, but like are to seemingly be a numbers gang kind of thing. I'll just say it, it's the tracksuit mafia because like no one will really know what that is. Like, huh? What is that? So and like within this two episodes, it seems like there is even to be some kind of boss person who are going to have to understand who eventually that actually is. Because immediately, if you're to immediately search or Google search, like, oh, who is to be so and so character, like, it doesn't really have a convenient answer for you right now. But that's the whole thing. I'm sure somebody could figure out, I'm sure a Comics Explained or something like that could tell you all of who these people are. And so, by and large, go ahead and check out Comics Explained because I'm sure he's going to tee up any number of these characters to give you the history on them because of this show, because that's usually what he does, and that's the thing that I like about Comics Explained, is he tees it up for everybody to tell you, oh, this is going to be, of course, this character, and this is going to be, of course, this character, and let's go through the whole backstory of Kate, or possibly Clint, to tie in so-and-so characters. So, with that said, leaving this extremely vague, let's now, tee up this show. What is this about? Well, without trying to give up any kind of spoilers, we find Kate being being this person who is to be a big fan of Hawkeye, and so Kate is, of course, to be a big fan of Hawkeye, so much so that she takes up archery. And God, how much can I even say in this show? But we find out that Kate is a lot more skilled than we are led to believe. Evidently, she was to, in her early years, got a black belt in karate and has a number of skills at her trophy case kind of thing, because we have it to where Kate is bringing Eleanor yet another trophy that she had gotten. I'm like, man, we gotta just either take down your other ones or just kind of figure out some place to put all these, because she gets one all the time for whatever she is to do. So it's kind of funny because Kate is to mention that she's the world's best archer, and so Clint is to say, it's who is to tell you that? Yourself, when you look in the mirror? Because Clint is just I don't think so. So yeah, you practiced once. Good for you. We really just have Clint, who's consistently just making fun of Kate, just making a joke even about her age, where he is to just go on and say, oh, you're 18, right? And she's like, I'm 22, and he's like, same thing. So Clint has to go and kind of clean up a mess that Kate has created, so to speak. Having really Kate not realizing what she had stepped in. And so now Clint has to go and leave his family via Christmas time. And he wanted so badly to go and hang out with his family to do all of these traditional things, like ugly sweaters and every stereotypical thing that you can go and do. Clint's like, hey man, we're going to do it all. We're going to do it all, family. And then he finds out that Kate is to do this thing. And then he's like, oh crap. There goes my, of course, Christmas time with my family. And then Clint has to go and take his kids to go back home with their mother. And so now, Clint is calling his wife, Laura, and want to get updates about, what's going on. Because he's like, I really wanted to spend time with them. And so that's kind of a really interesting story that we have Hawkeye that may just be possibly handing over the torch to Kate in this show, simply because Hawkeye doesn't really want to be Hawkeye anymore, but he's also just reminded of the past in this show. And we still have to remember that Hawkeye is still Ronin in this show, and that he has to kind of break away from his past, which is kind of an interesting thing here, where there's kind of a lot of we could probably go way deeper in the thought process of the kind of the mental analysis of Hawkeye's character through these two shows, but that would take a crap ton of time. So Hawkeye is cleaning up Kate's mess, and then having to even literally clean her up. So we're on this chase to have Kate kind of figuring things out for herself, because she is to find her way into her own family mystery, let's just say. And there's so much about this that I have to kind of like, I have to vague it out because this isn't spoilers. So really fun, Christmas themed, and we'll see where this all swerves about. And we also have it where Clint is to go on and need to face this threat that Kate has basically stepped in and basically wiped them all out, because like he wants to see how deep this is to go, so that way nothing is to come back on him, or even on Kate, so that way this can all be over. Because I guess really once you step into a hornet's nest, you got to realize like if there's anything on your boot kind of thing, and that you're gonna like drag on with you. And so that's kind of what Clint is doing here. He's kind of like safely going on and like protecting his foot. So we find out that Kate, evidently their family, I guess, is to be rich, luckily for her. And so Kate is to be having their family being put together into this Bishop security like company, which I'm like, okay, so how is Kate probably going to get incorporated in SHIELD or any number of things at some point, right? Because maybe SHIELD is going to buy out Bishop's security maybe after this show is to end. A lot of people are also immediately asking, like, hey, when is Belova going to show up from the Black Widow movie? Because spoilers to the end credits of that film, but like by now you should probably see everything. If you haven't seen everything by now, like if you haven't, like, if you're coming into these shows thinking that you don't have to watch everything, you pretty much do. Like, I think, like, we've kind of set that up that you pretty much have to forcibly watch everything. Even though they can technically re-reference things, still, like, some people might just be like, well, what the heck is this? What's going on here? What is this little reference? And what's going on? Like, hey, Hawkeye has a wife and kids? Yeah, because Age of Ultron will tell you so. Like, I would probably you would probably have to mostly watch, well, no, you'd have to watch all the way through Endgame because, yeah, like, at least. Because there's really a lot of stuff here that is to re-reference even Endgame. So you kind of have to watch, like, everything. You basically have, like, that's the thing where you have to, like, forcibly be a fan and watch a billion films if you want to, like, get into, like, the MCU. And that's kind of like the heartbreaking thing where it's like, if you have a new person that's going to jump into the MCU, it's like, well, hey, like, you're going to be there for a while. Like, oh, can I just jump in and just watch these new shows? No, because you have to watch 30 films before you can get there. Because I know there's a lot of people where they kind of convert people into the MCU because they're like, hey, man, I finally want to watch these superhero movies. It's like, well, you have to start all the way at Iron Man. It's like, well, can I just watch, like, one Avengers movie and I'll get caught up? No. That's the hilarious thing, that if you're a big fan and you've watched all of these, you know exactly what I mean. So let's go out of our way to just say it's spoiler time. I've talked about this far too long. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we need to spoil this episode. So one thing that I want to get out of the way is some comic book character references. But, like, I think some people will probably say, oh, well, this is a no-brainer thing. So now that we're in spoilers and now I can, like, tee it up to these people, of what is going on in the show and kind of giving you the comic book references. So we have Jack Duquesne, the guy who is to be engaged to Eleanor in this episode. He, of course, is to be the Marvel character called the Swordsman. And so if that wasn't obvious, because all the swords being popped up all throughout this whole entire house, and I can't freaking pronounce the last name, because good God. So, and I know, and I've watched this twice, and really I'm just like, blah, with that name. Duquesne? Is that right? Ballparkingly? Jack is to be the swordsman. We really have it where supposedly in this episode, like right off the bat, they end up killing off Kate's father, tying into the Avengers movie. And I don't actually think that he's dead. Because weirdly in the comic books, Eleanor was actually supposed to be dead in the comic books, and we found out later that she was still actually alive, being somebody somewhere. So I'm assuming that since we don't actually see Kate's father's death, like I don't think that he's actually dead. But everybody just make a bet going or something. Just like, I think he's dead. Like, I think that he, like, but it's kind of so strange that in the early beginning of this, we have Kate who is talking to her dad and saying, like, okay, we have to get out of here. We have to leave. We have to move somewhere. And it's because, I guess, like, Kate's father is to be doing some dicey work somewhere. But I think it's probably the opposite. I think actually, like, Eleanor is doing some dicey work, but she didn't want to move. She didn't want to go anywhere. Hence why maybe she possibly had gotten engaged to the swordsman just so that way she can be protected. Maybe that's the way that this story is to break down. So, at the end of this episode, I don't exactly know who the actual boss is comic book-wise, but I'm sure someone will easily break it down to just like, oh yeah, that's easily so-and-so. But I also just want to be, like, surprised via next week who this actually is, but there is no that going on for... Like, after anyone is to see this show past X amount of seconds, they're like, oh, well, that's so-and-so person. She's a leader of whatever. Like, I know that we might actually get some roles in of certain kind of characters, like maybe like a Madame Mask or something like that, or some goofy kind of character, which we don't understand why they're even in this show. But we're having fun with it. So let's go and... let's go into this actual review and let's talk about let's do a breakdown of this show. So, very beginning of the episode, we are to be going right back into 2012, and immediately once they showed 2012, I'm like, so this is Avengers? Like, they're recovering Avengers? Like, so... Like, Kate was involved in Avengers movie? And so, Kate, who is a young kid, is to be snooping on her parents' conversation. And so, her parents are talking about moving or leaving, and Kate is to overhear that, but then she is to accidentally stumble or drop on something. And her father ends up coming in and be like, what did you hear? Like, maybe you shouldn't be snooping and trying to hear other people's conversation. And so Kate is like, well, then what will I know what you're saying if I'm not in the same room? And so her father is just like, touche. Like, there's going to be a lot of paraphrasing here. It's not going to be perfectly in line with the show. because for me, I always don't get dialogue perfectly, but I try to just kind of like say what's best, or try to say what's best for the part of the show. So Kate is talking to her dad and mentioning that like kind of like the weather is changing, and there is like always like this unexpected kind of weather kind of thing going on. There's always a storm, a brewing kind of thing. And so all of a sudden we then transition to there being the attack on New York. And so the we have, of course, the T'Challa, the villains from the alien villains from the very first Avengers movies. I always ill pronounce them incorrectly. Uh, T'Challa. They end up attacking New York, and they end up blasting through Kate's room, and so Kate all of a sudden is to be seeing Hawkeye go and arrow his way through a number of these T'Challa guys and kill them off. And then he, of course, does the one maneuver where he has this like grappling arrow, where then he like goes and like ropes down his way into some window and breaks through that window. And so they're like replaying that scene in the beginning of this, and I'm like, really? They have to like reuse footage? But like, I'm figuring like, what are they gonna have Hawkeye look just like the Hawkeye from the first Avengers? I'm like, you know what? That's okay. Like, that's fine. Like, either way, I think that's cool to have really just Kate being tied to the Avengers movie in some way or whatever. And so Kate is to see Hawkeye, and she's like, oh my god, he's amazing. Like, that's so great. And then so Eleanor comes in is to grab Kate and like, hey, we got to get out of here. We got to find someplace safe. And we end up finding out that Kate's father is to die somehow or another. Like, I've seen this twice now. I'm like, okay, how exactly did her father die? It's a mystery. Or just said to be dead, and like it's a whole cover-up thing. Because maybe Eleanor took this time to go and kill her own husband, and maybe that's going to be the swerve of the show. Let me know in the comments below what you feel is going to be the biggest like swerve of this show. Because I feel like something's a brewing here, that we're going to find out that Eleanor was the villain the whole entire time. Or like we're going to find out like some kind of something where somebody like, it's either Kate's dad's not dead or Eleanor is to be the villain of this story, because there has to be somebody, right? So, cue us up to now present day, where we have Kate who is at this school, and so she is going and having these two other girls like go and challenge Kate to fire a arrow and hit this bell to make it chime. And so Kate is going and trying to figure out how to make this bell chime. And she's like, well, like, do I actually have to hit the bell, or do I have to hit the like the piece inside of it to then like make the bell chime? And they're like, well, I don't know. And so here's a hilarious thing here. So Kate goes and fires onto this bell, and she just bounces off of it. And like it doesn't really chime. It just kind of like bung, it vibrates. And like, so you would think that like for her to just make this sound, you would think like that would have been possibly good enough. But no. So Kate then goes and adjusts her arrow and then fires away. And she, of course, within the next shot is to, of course, hit the little rope that is to all of a sudden have this bell chime. And so Kate's like, yeah, I did it. But then all of a sudden, I guess this bell was done so poorly, and this bell was also on some clock tower like thing. And so the bell completely just like breaks. And so Kate at some point while seeing this like bell slowly but surely break, she's like, "Oh, well, like every bell has character. Like I'm sure like this will be fine." But then like the bell completely breaks off, and and like not only that, but like the clock tower is to basically go along with it. And then so Kate is like, "Oh crap." Then she turns around and there's conveniently a security guard going like, "Hey, where were you on the night of tonight?" "Where were you?" "I'm here to arrest you immediately because I just figured out exactly where you were because I saw one arrow go in, so I ran to figure out where you were. Conveniently." So I'm assuming like probably Kate had to possibly be like either like I don't know if she was suspended or like what she was, but I'm sure the punishment was really harsh. Maybe she was kicked out of school because she's not really in school anymore. So maybe she's just going through holiday break. I don't know. So I don't know if like the school that she goes to really has holiday break, but that's just me. So Kate is to make her way home, and so we of course have Eleanor now having to talk to Kate about like, well, hey, like you know what, like I get it that you're a girl who has always been rich and always been like privileged and whatever, and like you've always had that, but that like hasn't really helped you like kind of be like a much more like level-headed person, and like and you have become a person that has now destroyed a priceless bell. so we find out here that Kate is actually like a rich girl, and like of course she is, because like they can't just make this like a poor girl from that just got this lottery ticket somewhere. And so one thing of course that I forgot is that when Kate was at her father's funeral, Kate was telling her mother that she needs to protect her, and the only way that she can do that is with a bow and arrow. And it's like, okay, like why do we have this girl like wanting to take on like she could have taken on guns, she could have taken on any number of things, but like I don't know what it is with Kate where she had to go and like have this like kind of Bruce Wayne kind of like thing. I guess because she just wanted to protect her mother from being killed at some point. So now that Kate is to, of course, like have her mother find out about this whole Belle situation, Eleanor is to mention to Kate, it's like, well, the one way that you can make this up to me is to go to this, I think it was like a charity ball, and like wear a red dress. Which, funny enough, like when Kate goes to this actual like fundraising thing, I don't know what I don't know, like it's like a banquet or something like that. It's always like one of those kinds of things. I know they say it, and I know they say it twice, but like it doesn't really matter. It's not like a real huge factor of a thing. So Kate instead is to wear this kind of tuxedo that hilariously is to be just like all the waiters. And I'm like, well, of course, because she has to figure out a way how to like stealthily make it through this place, so that way no one would know who she actually is. or they'll just all think that she's a waiter. So so Eleanor is to evidently have like a cluster collection of swords all the way through this apartment, and Kate is to ask why Eleanor has all these things. And so Eleanor is to mention that she is to be going with this guy named Jack. And so we have Kate, who is to go off to uh, this banquet of a thing to find out there's to be this guy named Armand, who I guess is to be the third Armand, and there's to be this smaller kid who is to be the seventh Armand. And I'm like, okay, how are they gonna probably like replay into the whole like seventh Armand thing, the kid? Like, I'm wondering if they're gonna replay into that somehow, because why would they even present this kid? It feels like a waste. So Kate is talking to Armand, and he has to spill the beans that both Eleanor and Jack are like engaged, and that they're lovebirds, and that like Armand tried to convince Jack that this was all a mistake, but like Jack was just far too much in love. So and we seem to have Armand, who is to be this kind of very nice guy, this kind of nice person, until we find out Armand later on is talking to Eleanor, and they're having this fight. They're having this fight over like some kind of something where Armand is to mention that, like, well, hey, like, I have my own kind of people too. Like don't threaten me, because like I have my own like things in place. And Kate is to overhear that, and she is to ask Eleanor what that was all about. And Eleanor conveniently just says, it's like, well, I don't even know what that was about. Like, and she walks off. Which I'm immediately saying that, or I'm immediately thinking that, like, the whole death of Armand was to possibly be planned from the get-go. So Kate is to go throughout this, and I know I'm kind of leaving out Hawkeye. I'll get back to it, but I want to kind of go through a lot of big chunks of this. So Kate is to, of course, then confront her mother about her being engaged, and she's like, "Whoops!" Like the cat's out of the bag. And so then Kate has to talk to Eleanor, like, I'm sorry that this is all really rushed, but like, hey, when you're in love, when you're in love, you're in love, and like some kind of thing like that. So like Kate is just like, well, okay then, like I guess I'm just like I'm not going to convince you. So Kate is to go off to find that Jack is to be doing some black market deals, and so of course there is to be a bidder there who is to say, it's like, well, hey guys, like all the stuff that you're buying here is to basically be on display only. Like you're never to actually use these, because like you would probably get arrested easily for them, and plus also like you don't want to tell anybody where you got these. And then like, ha 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 ha. So let's put a pin on that, and let's refocus on to Clint. And I know I feel like I'm like leaving at a cliffhanger like thing, but let's get back to Clint. Let's get to Clint. So Clint in the very beginning of this episode is to be in a Avengers like Broadway show. Well, not him himself. He's to be like in the audience watching as this Broadway show is to be put together about the first Avengers movie. And so we have this one merry band of Avengers who are all singing like, I can do this all day. Man, that sounded bad. I was like, day. Anyways, come on, do it in key. Anyways, whatever. Uh, so Clint is to not even be paying attention to this whole Broadway show about the Avengers, and his daughters to kind of give him a nudge and be like, "Hey, like, are you even paying attention to this?" And so Clint is just like, "Well, like, I was there. Like, I know the story. Like, I know how this all breaks down." So, like, I'm trying to see here, what actually is, to be, uh, what is actually, come on. Let me pause here for 1 second. Lila, I'm assuming, because, like, of course, they're like, okay, where are the kids' names? Because they're going to pop up sometime soon. So, we have Clinton, who is to decide to go off and is to not watch the rest of the show, and he walks out of it. Simply because, one, also, he is to see a character that is to be similar to Black Widow, and so he's like, like, reminding him of Nat, reminding him of Black Widow. And so Clint, of course, is to leave this play, and because he also realizes that it's inaccurate, because Ant-Man is to also be in the Avengers story, and that's not how it worked. I don't know why it is that they keep tossing in Ant-Man in this show. Maybe because Paul Rudd and Renner are actually to be really good friends in real life, so they keep bringing up Ant-Man. Or maybe it's just a goofy coincidence that they keep putting in there. For this Broadway show, I feel like it was kind of like on the cheap end of things, but when really looking at it, like, how much money do you think that, like, Disney is going to spend on every little aspect of this show? Um, Also, and, like, why would they want this theater thing to look exactly like the actual Avengers thing? Because maybe they don't know, or maybe they don't whatever. So we so Clint is to go off and just um have a, of course, uh like, meal with his kids, and, like, evidently he's to be at this Chinese restaurant where they are going to not let him pay. It's like, hey man, this is all in the house. Like, you saved our city. And Clint is just like, hey man, thank you. Like, I really appreciate it. But he kind of just feels so weird and so awkward, for that whole, like, moment. So Clint is to go and ask Cooper, Leela, and Nathaniel, like, hey, like what Christmas traditional thing should we all do? Like, let me know every single traditional thing that we're gonna have to do together. And so, like, Clint is mentioning that he wants them to all see this big Christmas tree, and that, like, they're gonna go and wear ugly sweaters and do all the traditional stuff that they can possibly do. See this big Christmas tree and all this and that. And so all of a sudden, we have Laura, who is calling, which of course is Clint's wife. And so she's kind of wanting a recap of how long did Clint stay in that show. And they're like, oh, he left halfway through. So, because, yeah, it's like Clint is just like, nah, like, I don't want a reminder of all the I had to do. So, like, we find out that, like, the reason why Clint has that hearing aid is probably from any number of things, because Kate at some point has asked Clint why he has a hearing aid, and Clint has no clue. Clint doesn't know. So Clint goes on and is to eventually find out on the news that Kate is going around dressed as Ronin, and now Clint has to go and find who this masked person is and get to them and try and uh, go on and stop this person from wearing this getup. And so now let's get to that part of that getup. So, and also we have where Clint is to unfortunately take all of his kids to have them all make their way back to Laura, and Lila is to ask Clint. It's like, well, you're going to like be with us in Christmas, and Clint's like, I will try to, and Clint is to say that he has roughly 5 days before Christmas, so he's going to try and make it there. So now let's get to the Kate stuff. So Kate is to be in this black market of these bidding wars. And so, like, there's to be some kind of stuff coming up, and then all of a sudden, the next thing that is to come up is a Ronin sword. And so Jack is wanting to really bid really high on the Ronin sword, and Armand is like, you don't even have that kind of money. And Jack is like, well, like what do I really need the money for? Like, what do I, like, he's probably just going to steal it anyways. So it seems that Armand is to buy the Ronin sword, and then the next thing up for this auction is to, of course, be like, to complete the set, you can get the Ronin outfit. That's kind of in this one little case. So, I'm like, man, they're kind of just, like, I guess this Ronin character really wasn't all that significant, I guess. Like, so I guess they weren't really gonna use this character for much after this. Like, they're just kind of throwing it away right now, which is kind of sad. So, all of a sudden, we have Kate, who's down there, and so one of the waiters was like, oh, hey, yeah, you're here, you can help me out. Great. Like, who sent you down here? And so she ends up saying some guy named, like, Gary or Phil or something like that. And so that guy is to come down there and is to say, like, okay, why are you actually here? Because I'm that person that you said had sent you down here, and I didn't send you down here. I don't even know who you are. Who are you? And Kate's like, well, like, I don't even know who I am. And then she walks off and she quits this job and she walks off. So all of a sudden, this tracksuit mafia breaks into this black market auction. And so they're, of course, now stealing stuff. But the main thing that they want to steal is some watch. Which I'm like, oh, okay, what is this? Like, Red Notice? Where there's some, like, watch that ties into some, like, magical door that is to open some big, massive payout of a thing? Like, what's going on here? So they're supposedly going on and stealing this watch. And so Kate, who is trying to do the right thing, is to put on this Ronin costume and defend, I guess, either like Jack or Mon or just anybody, because she has the skills to pay the bills, so to speak. So Kate is defending off all of these tracksuit mafia characters, and she is to consistently go through and fight off these tracksuit mafia people, to all of a sudden randomly see this dog that's there that she's like, oh, hey, like, hey, dog. And so all of a sudden, like, Kate and this dog are to, like, immediately become, like, best of friends, because this dog was to save Kate from one of these tracksuit mafia guys. And so, like, Kate is like, hey, you need a home there, Lucky? You need a home there, dog? So Kate goes off and is to bring this dog to her home. And so then she ends up going back out. And so what ends up happening is Clint Barton is to help Kate kind of make her way through some of these tracksuit mafia like guys. And so at the end of all this, at the end of all the first episode, Clint is to then go and grab Kate in this Ronin suit and is to unmask her to find out that it's some young girl. And he's like, oh, crap. So within the next episode, we have, like, of course, Clint wanting to find out who this girl is. And I hope I kind of covered everything in episode 1. Oh, wait, like, there's another thing that I have to cover. Because Kate was to go back after kind of bringing this dog home. She ends up coming back to find Armand dead, as well with a number of candies that it seems that Jack was to enjoy at some point. So Kate is to find Armand dead, and there is no actual killer present. So we don't know if the Tracksuit Mafia had killed this guy or any number of other people. And Kate is to immediately suspect that Armand was possibly killed by Jack, but, like, there is no real evidence of that. So when Kate is to leave this place after maybe having certain people suspect that the Ronin possibly had killed Armand, Kate had went off to leave, and that's when, of course, she gets re-met by the Tracksuit Mafia, and they go on and try to grab her, but Clint ends up saving her and then going and finding out where, ending up finding out that she is to be who she is to be, of course, Kate. So in the second episode, we have Clint, who is to ask Kate, like, how well she had covered her tracks kind of thing, and where did she go throughout that night wearing this costume, because this costume comes with a number of enemies that Clint had amassed through the time of which he was Ronin, because he had just killed a number of people. So Kate is to go and have her and him go to her apartment, and so Clint is to go and try to get certain supplies, and Kate is to think, oh, like, you're gonna go and get your, like, trick arrows and whatever. And so Clint goes off to some kind of like, store somewhere to buy first aid, to not only like, bandage up some of his wounds, but to also bandage up some of hers, because, like, she doesn't really bother to take care of her wounds. And so now Clint is to have to go and re-band-aid and like, heal this girl's wounds, so that way it heals a lot quicker than what she was going to do, just slapping a band-aid on it, just thinking that it was just going to be okay. So Clint is to talk to Kate and, like, figure things out about, like, if she had let anybody kind of follow her back to this place. And so Kate, of course, had mentioned that, well, hey, yeah, like, I at one point dropped off this dog here, and because Clint is like, oh, is this your dog? And Kate's like, no, I just found him somewhere. And so Kate is to say that she dropped off this dog and that the doorbell on this apartment is to tell people her name. And so all of a sudden we have Clint, who is to see outside this apartment complex that there's a bunch of tracksuit mafia characters all tossing Molotov cocktails, now burning down this apartment. And so now Clint and Kate are now running off to have the Ronin suit be left in this apartment. And Kate is like, well, shouldn't we go after the suit? And Clint is like, well, like, I think it'll be fine. If anything, we can go back to it after we just get out of here, because the real point of all this is that way they can just be safe. Uh, we also had Kate when she was to go on and do that whole trick thing with the bell. She was wearing like some kind of like her equivalent, I guess, of a Hawkeye costume. And like, because I guess she always has to like wear the right clothes for like being an archer, so she always has to wear like Hawkeye-ish like clothes. So Clint and Kate are running off, and so now Clint has asked Kate, it's like, well, hey, is there anywhere else that we can kind of hide out? And Kate is to kind of go into this apartment complex and just kind of like hit all of these doorbells to just tell somebody that pizza's there. And so Kate is to go off to this one apartment that I guess is to be her aunt's. And so Kate is to go on and is to kind of pick the lock and get into this room. So now I guess Kate has somewhere to go. So now Clint is to go on and like kind of follow Kate just to see if there's anybody that's going to come after her. And so both Clint and Kate are going to or Clint is following Kate to her job, that is to be at the Bishop security job, which is so because Kate is to go and try and talk to Jack at this point about kind of things in episode 2. And then Kate is to walk off because she has something to do with her work or her job. And Eleanor's like, I'm sorry, I'm technically your boss, so like whatever you have to do work wise, like I don't think you have anything. I don't think you really have anything pressing. And so Kate just wants to leave. So we find out that like her own mother is her boss. So Kate is to go off to work, and so Clint is to go on to go and find where the Ronin costume is. And while they're both walking through this spot, we at some points have Clint, who is to be asked for autographs or to be asked for selfies. We have Clint in the first episode during that play was to, of course, be asked for a selfie right in the men's room with some guy just being like, well, hey, man, can we do a selfie? And Clint's like, it's not the right time. Like, he's going and basically peeing. And so when Clint is going and washing his hands, like, the guy's like, well, do you think now is the perfect time? And I would just be like, dude, you are never getting this selfie. You're never getting this photo. Like, go and, like, clip me, like, while I'm walking away from you, because that's all you're going to get. Like, just be really nice about it. So, but we end up having, while Clint's walking, we have some young kid who's like, oh my god, superhero! And Clint is to immediately turn, thinking that this kid is to go and is going to immediately say, oh yeah, like I'll go and I'll do an autograph or I'll do some photo or something with you, kid. But then like the kid ends up running off to like an Ant-Man and a Cadmus Everdeen, like the Hunger Games girl. And so like Kate, who misinterprets uh like Katniss uh as like Hawkeye, and she's like, "Oh yeah, um that's you, right?" And Clint's like, "No, that's the Hunger Games girl. That's the Katniss Everdeen." And like so we have another Ant-Man reference in episode 2. So which I'm just like, are they going to team up both Ant-Man and Hawkeye together? That would actually be a pretty fun combination. But so uh and so we have Kate, who's mentioned, it's like, well, you know what? You really need like some kind of branding or some kind of something. Like we're really looking at it, like you wear like just too many clothes that are to just be like to protect yourself, but like you don't actually have a brand. You don't actually have like a logo or something like that you have on you. And like when really looking at it, like for this character, that's really true because we have where the first time you see Hawkeye, you see that kind of shield symbol, and that's really it. Where you kind of like see him later on, like he's just wearing these like purple get-ups of sorts, and like there still may be like an Arrow logo that you kind of see kind of faded or kind of like barely, but like we don't have Hawkeye that has like a legitimate logo that you can easily see compared to all the other characters, which I guess is to be like, well, maybe that's a good thing. So Clint is to give Kate this burner phone and is to tell her it's like, hey, do not crazily call me because I will block you and I will delete you. So like only call me for emergencies. So Kate is to immediately call Clint to just be like, yeah, I just want to make sure that you're like you're on my phone and so on and so forth, and I just want to make sure it's the right number. And so Kate goes off uh, to go and uh, find out that she's gonna get a call at her work mentioning about her fire of her apartment, and so Kate is trying as much as possible to say that she wasn't there because she was somewhere else or that she has some kind of alibi for that night. And so this police officer is asking Kate, it's like, well, hey, can we talk? Like, can we talk about this whole situation? Like, like face to face? And Kate's just like, well, I'm working right now. Can I get to you tomorrow morning? And he's like, okay, sure. So Kate is then to go on and talk to Eleanor and Jack. And so while they're having this conversation, like Jack and Eleanor are having Kate like, hey, how about we all have dinner together? Like, how about we just spend some quality time together? And we have Jack who is trying to like brain ninja like Kate because he had read a stepfather's book at some point because he's like, well, yeah, I just wanted to read up. I just wanted to like see if I can because I guess he like really figured that he was going to easily win over Eleanor, so he decided to read this stepfather's book. So we have where Kate is to tell like his Jack or his Kate is telling Jack and Eleanor, it's like, well, hey, uh I'll go and I'll do this whole thing, but I want to have my own like talking points. Like I want to be the one who is to kind of uh like mention where this conversation is going and not like deflect on me and so on and so forth. So Jack of course, is to agree to that, and so they go on this like dinner date together, and we'll get to that. So Clint is now to go and try to go off to figure out where this Ronin suit is, and Clint is to find out that there is this suit that had been stolen by this guy named Grills, and Clint is to find out on this vehicle there's to be a logo that says New York LARPers. And so Clint has to go and track down where this thing is. And so he also ends up tracking down this guy who is to have this suit. And he has this video kind of mentioning that he has this now new ninja suit that he's like, oh my god, like this guy's going viral with this. Oh my god, he's going to die soon. So Clint goes off to this LARPer event, seemingly after he gets rid of his kids. And so Clint is to go off and is to try and just be able to talk to this one Grills guy. But they're like, you know what, you can't just go in here. Like, if anything, all these people are, like, legitimate, like, firefighters or, like, police officers and whatever, and, like, you can get hurt. And he's like, huh? Like, so Clint is to now have to go off and get these, like, foam swords and this supposed armor, and he is to have to go and now play in this, like, role-playing, like medieval times like thing. And so they're trying to ask Clint all this information about like, hey, what's your name? And he's like, I don't have one. And like, hey, what's your email? It's like, that's confidential. It's like, and so they're trying to get some kind of information off of this guy. And here's the thing, so they weren't gonna, like, he wasn't gonna get their name, or he wasn't gonna give him his name, but he gives them his credit card, so they would get his name off of his credit card. Like, you would think immediately. So Clint goes and is to sign up for this thing, and they end up giving him this like scroll, and Clint is like, well, what am I going to do with this scroll? Like, is this some mission or what? And so they're like, no, that's the thing that you live by. And he's like, huh? Like, what the? So Clint just goes off and is to, of course, make his way through all these people, like sorting them all up. And we can really tell that all the like slices that he is to do here is to all be very familiar to his Ronin stuff, where he's to kind of like, kind of weirdly protect himself by kind of putting the sword like from behind him, doing all these like weird maneuvers. So like the only thing sad about this is we don't get enough time to marinate on the Ronin character, like we never really did. And so to now have this character here now, kind of doing these sword movements and whatever. But so Clint is to go off and finally make his way easily through all these people because he's slicing through all their chests, which is to render people defeated. And so supposedly Clint is to make it to this guy named Grills, and he's like, hey man, like, take off this costume. Like, you take it off or I'm going to punch you for real, and then I'm going to take this costume off of you. So, and I thought that was so hilarious. I'm like, we have Clint that's like, dude, I'm playing around, but I'm not playing around. Like, I'm around having to forcibly play, but I'm not playing around kind of thing. So, we have Grills who's like, okay, man, like, I'm willing to give you this costume, but, like, I want to defeat you. Like, I want to, like, like I want to kill you because you're an Avengers man. Like I want the street cred of you of taking you down, kind of thing. Like I want to like this will be like my like the thing that I can hold for the rest of my life of being the guy that took you down supposedly. And so Clint is just like, okay, fine. So Clint is to kind of like tee it up to just have this guy just chop him in the head. And Grill is like, no, like it's trial by combat. Like you have to make it real. You have to like, you have to make me believe that I'm going to beat you. And so Clint is like, are you serious? So they get together and they're fighting it out. And so they're talking to one another, and so Grills was like, hey man, are you ready for this? And Hawkeye's like, yeah. So you would have thought that something would have happened there to have gotten really to get really Clint really ticked off to where it's just like bah! And like he accidentally hits Grills by accident because he just gets so maybe he just gets caught up in it or something. Plus, you probably have to realize like Hawkeye probably does have like post traumatic stress disorder from all the stuff that he had to be like bottled up into. Plus, it was kind of hilarious when Grills was to go and try and tell Hawkeye that it's like, hey man, like I need to like take you down, and I need to do it by trial by combat. And like Clint was like, dude, I fought Thanos once. Like, come on, man. So Grills is to like tell Clint like, hey man, you ready to die? And he's like, sure, make it look good, kind of thing. So Clint, of course, gets defeated, and everybody's like, oh snap! Like we have one guy in the background who's like ching ching ching, like as if it's like lightsabers or something, and you have to have the sound effects. But like that's how really people are. If you want that real feel of a real fight. So Clint goes down. The costume is to be given to this guy, and so Grills is to ask Clint like, "Hey man, did you actually have fun here?" And Clint is just like, "No, like no." It's like it's all like the same for him, where it's like him having to like fight for fake is just like I don't know how people can get enjoyment out of this because like for fighting for like fake because and so like we have Clint who's to tell Grills it's like, hey man, go and like hand in all of my equipment because I don't want that showing up on my credit card. And so Grills is to mention like how he really appreciated what Hawkeye did for him, and Clint's like, yeah, sure, okay. So Clint walks off with the costume and is to put it in some like I think subway station like key locker somewhere, and so he's calling Laura and saying yeah, I got the costume back. Now I just have to eventually find out about these tracksuit mafia guys, how further down it really is. That this might come back to haunt me or might come back to get back at Kate. So I now have to go and try to like protect either one of us. So let's transition back to Kate. So Kate is now talking with Jack and with Eleanor, and so it seems like Kate is asking Jack plenty of enough questions, um, and Jack, of course, is to supposedly mention like, hey, he's an open book. He's not really going to lie to Kate. If anything, he probably is not going to just boast about how good he really is, or like he's not going to just boast about any number of things. So Kate is to really want to ask Jack about how well he really is as a swordsman, because Kate is to be also well at being a swordsman also. So Kate is to, of course, challenge Jack to this fencing fight out. And Jack, of course, accepts because Kate conveniently has some fencing gear for him to use. So Kate and Jack are to go and consistently fight, and Jack consistently lets Kate win. And Kate's like, "You're letting me win." And Jack's like, "No, you're skilled. Like, you're really skilled. Like bravo to you. You're really good." But then immediately when Jack is to finally just go and take Kate's sword from away from her and fling it away, like Kate is to now be frustrated because Jack is to not really showcase his real legitimate skill here. And Jack is like, "So what if I'm really good? So what?" So we have Kate going and talking to Jack and Eleanor, and all this leads is to just have Kate leave after Jack is to have this thing of candy that he is to give to Kate that looks just like the candy from Armad's place. So Kate is to go off and leave and say that she has to do something for work, which is a blatant lie. And so she is to go and call Clint and tell him, like, "Hey, I have a number of clues uh, that I think can kind of help our case out." And so she calls Clint and gets at first time the answering machine, and then the second time around she ends up getting a person answering the phone who isn't Clint, who's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Clint Barton can't come to the phone right now. Like, he's gonna die or he's gonna be dead." So cue Clint going off, and the reason why this whole message was to be put onto his phone. Clint had gone off to try and seek out where the tracksuit mafia was, and he had his bow and his arrow there, and he's just like, "Okay, guys, like, take me to your leader," kind of thing. So Clint goes off to be having a bag over his head, and Clint is to mention, like, "Hey, man, I can see through this bag." And they're like, "Shut up." So Clint is to be taken to his headquarters, and immediately he is to like make fun of the fact of this like awful hideout that they have, and the guys are just like, "Well, hey, man, like this is really hard to get this place." And so we have it where like Clint Barton is just immediately like, "You know what, could I speak to your manager? Like, this is like talking to like a furniture or something. Like, come on, like, give me to your boss. Like, let me see how far this goes. Like, is that your boss over there? Like, that guy? Like, could I just talk to this person?" And so all of a sudden Kate is to come crashing through this window, and like of course she makes a horrible superhero entrance because she's new at this. And so now both Clint and Kate are to be like duct taped to these weird children's rides. And so because like Clint easily breaks out of his out of the things that he was tied up in. And so now we have Ivan, who is to be the leader of the tracksuit mafia, going to this actual woman who is to set up that she, I guess, is to be the big boss of this, to just say, like, "Hey, we now have, like, Kate Bishop, and we have Clint Barton here." And so I guess she's going to go off and talk to these people in the following week's episode. And we had Ivan and the Tracksuit Mafia easily realizing it that Kate Bishop was to be Ronin and it wasn't Clint Barton. And like they had this whole back and forth about it too. They have like to where it's just like they're asking who Clint really is, and if he is the Ronin or if he isn't, and whatever. And like, there's this whole back and forth about it. But then Clint is asked for their leader, their manager, whatever. And so, with that said, I think I've hoped that I've covered most of this episode, but there's probably little details that I had probably forgotten about. There's probably a whole huge gap of story that I probably rushed through. And so, without further ado, I'm going to get the heck out of here so that way I can go on and try and review some other stuff. Because I know how these things, they tend to just kind of be a thing that I put out. Like, it doesn't like crack open the bottle of champagne when I go and do any number of these reviews. But I would be watching this content regardless, like anyone else would. So that's probably the real reason why these like reviews don't carry any weight, because it's like, it's not like I'm going to possibly be like giving anything new to the table. But I like the fact that we end up having some kind of mystery characters here that we're wanting to find out what their story is. So we'll see how that trickles out. I'm probably assessing that probably we have Belova coming into the next episode, maybe rescuing both Clint and Kate. Maybe that's how they introduce her into the next episode. And so we'll see how that plays out. We'll see how we go further into this story. Really enjoying it so far. And like, it's a whole kind of mystery show where how is this all going to play out. Really fun so far. Really enjoying it so far. So, yeah. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.